Charlton Heston at the National Press Club, February 1997. Cut 1, go.
Today, I want to talk to you about guns. Why we have them, why the Bill of Rights guarantees that we can have them, and why my right to have a gun is more important than your right to rail against it in the press. I believe every good journalist needs to know why the Second Amendment must be considered more essential than the First Amendment. This may be a bitter pill to swallow, but the right to keep and bear arms is not archaic. It's not an outdated, dusty idea some old dead white guys dreamed up in fear of the redcoats. No, it's just as essential to liberty today as it was in 1776. These words may not play well at the press club, but it's still the gospel down at the corner bar and grill. And your efforts to undermine the Second Amendment, to deride it and denigrate it, to degrade it, to readily accept diluting it, and eagerly promote redefining it, threaten not only the physical well-being of millions of Americans, but also the core concept of individual liberty our founding fathers struggled to perfect and protect. I agree wholeheartedly. A free press is vital to a free society. But I wonder, how many of you will agree with me that the right to keep and bear arms is not just equally vital, but the most vital to protect all the other rights we enjoy? I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. It is America's first freedom, the one right that protects all the others. Among freedom of speech, of the press, of religion, of assembly, of redress of grievances, it is the first among equals. It alone offers the absolute capacity to live without fear. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all. Now, either you believe that or you don't, and you must decide. Because there's no such thing as a free nation where police and military are allowed the force of arms, but individual citizens are not. That's a big brother knows best theater of the absurd that has never boded well for the present peasant class, the working class, or even for reporters. Now, I doubt any of you would prefer a rolled-up newspaper as a weapon against a dictator or a criminal intruder. Yet, in essence, that's what you've asked our loved ones to do through an ill-contrived and totally naive campaign against the Second Amendment. Besides, how can we entrust to you the Second Amendment when you are so stingy with your own First Amendment? I say this because of the way in recent days you've treated your own, those journalists you consider the least among you. How quick you've been to finger the paparazzi with blame and to eye the tabloids with disdain. How eager you've been to draw a line where there is none, to demand some distinction within the First Amendment that sneers, they are not one of us. How readily you let your lesser brethren take the fall, as if their rights were not as worthy and their purpose not as pure and their freedom not as sacred as yours. So now, as politicians consider new laws to shackle and gag paparazzi, who among you will speak out? Who here will stand and defend them? Well, if you won't, I will. Because you do not define the First Amendment. It defines you. And it is bigger than you. Big enough to embrace all of you, plus all those you would exclude. That's how freedom works. Clearly, too many have used freedom of the press as a weapon, not only to strangle our free speech, but to erode and ultimately destroy the right to keep and bear arms as well. In doing so, you promoted your profession to that of constitutional judge and jury, more powerful even than our Supreme Court, more prejudiced than the Inquisition's tribunals. It's a frightening misuse of constitutional privilege. And I pray that you will come to your senses and see that these abuses are curbed. As a veteran of World War II, as a freedom marcher who stood with Dr. Martin Luther King long before it was fashionable, and as a grandfather who wants the coming century to be free and full of promise for my grandchildren, I am troubled. The right to keep and bear arms is threatened by political theatrics, piecemeal lawmaking, talk show psychology, extreme bad taste in the entertainment industry, and ever-widening educational chasm in our schools, and a conniving media that all add up to cultural warfare against the idea that guns ever had or should now have an honorable and proud place in our society.
Absolutely.